Joining me right now is the Energy Secretary, Dan Brouillette. And Mr. Secretary, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me, Maria.
So first, do you know what went on with the OPEC meeting today? We were expecting that we would see a meeting virtually, but obviously it's not happening or it's delayed. Do you know the status of that today?
Sure, Maria. I think what they're going to do is meet later in the week. I'm not, as you know, we're not parties to this OPEC conversation, if you will, not in a direct way. But our understanding in conversations with both the minister in Saudi Arabia as well as the minister in Russia is that they're going to get together later this week and hopefully end this disagreement that started perhaps 2 or 3 weeks ago in the last OPEC meeting.
So what is the disagreement about? The president has said that he has spoken with MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who he expected that would agree to a production cut, and Russia would agree to a production cut of between 10 and 15%. Do you believe that is still happening?
Yes, I do. I think what the disagreement is about is how to address the reduction in demand all across the world as a result of this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic. We are in America adjusting our markets, but through a different methodology altogether. As you know, Maria, in the United States, we have a free market, and the industry will adjust on its own. But for state-run enterprises like what exists in Saudi Arabia and in Russia, they have to make those decisions, and as part of the OPEC, they want to make it collectively.
Well, we have had such a successful shale industry. I've been saying this for some time now, over the last couple of weeks. It does not surprise me that Russia would decide to pile on America right now while we're in the middle of a crisis by saying, I'm not going to agree to a production cut, because the Russians want to put out of business the shale industry in America. Isn't that right?
No, that's right. Look, it's a very competitive market all around the world. And I think that's what surprised some people here in the United States, most particularly perhaps in the United States Congress. They saw the actions that were taken just a few weeks ago by both Saudi Arabia and Russia, or at least the announcements, to be somewhat predatory. As we address this pandemic, as other economies address this pandemic, I think most people would suggest that we need to focus on that. Focus on the demand that's been destroyed as a result of that pandemic, and then adjust accordingly. But some saw the actions to increase production during this period as a direct attack on the U.S. shale industry.
How many shale companies do you expect are not going to be able to make it? I mean, with oil at $27, you've got to believe that they're not going to be able to get out of this.
That's a very difficult question, because you have to analyze the cost structure of each one of those companies. Some have cost structures that allow them to be competitive at very low prices in the marketplace. Others have high debt burdens that will be a problem for them in the very near future. So it's hard to tell individual companies what will happen. But overall, we're seeing the rig count down in America, but that's a usual and customary adjustment to a demand curve, which we all know is lower than what it was just 3 months ago.
I mean, you look at Texas getting hit hard from both the coronavirus pandemic as well as the oil shock, Secretary. Tell me about that. How would you assess where we are right now in terms of the health of that industry?
I think we're still very strong. One of the beautiful things about this industry is that it's been very innovative. We're looking at some of the finest entrepreneurs in the world. Over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, the technology that's been deployed in the oil fields is just simply remarkable. And it's what's been the success story behind the energy industry for the last 3 or 4 decades. We've gone from an importing nation to an exporting nation solely because of the innovation that this industry has brought to the marketplace.
So what kind of help might the federal government provide to these energy companies that have been doing exactly what you're saying, enjoying an incredible bullish period, and yet now with oil where it is, it's a different strain on their cash flow?
Well, we looked at this week, some of the tools that we have available to us in the U.S. government. One of those is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and we've made available that storage to this particular industry. So as you know, Maria, what happens in the oil business, when you're producing oil, you have to either use it or you have to store it. Because demand is down, storage becomes the only option. We have approximately 77 million barrels left in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and we're making that available to the industry.
Well, the president wanted to buy more, but was pushed back by the Democrats in that most recent most recent relief bill. Do you think the president will, at some point, continue buying, pushing for buying more oil for the strategic reserve?
Yes, he's directed me not only to continue the program that we announced this week, but also to look for additional storage capacities all throughout the country, be they commercially or government available. So we're going to do that. Under the U.S. federal law, we are authorized as part of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to reserve up to 1 billion barrels of oil. So we're going to work with the Congress. We're going to continue that conversation on the Hill and pursue this opportunity because it's just a great opportunity for the taxpayer. Right at the moment, at oil prices being where they are, it's a great time to fill this petroleum reserve.
I totally get that. What about the president's willingness to implement tariffs on foreign oil? Should he go forward with that?
Look, all options are on the table. The president made that very, very clear. As I talked about earlier, for those who would take a predatory advantage of the U.S. market, the president will react accordingly. We hope to continue the conversation, though, all throughout the week. So, as the OPEC meeting occurs perhaps later this week, we're also going to encourage the Saudis as chair of the G20 to perhaps convene an energy ministerial toward the end of the week. And I expect that that's going to happen late this week.
All right, we will leave it there. Secretary, we'll be watching. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Maria.